Hi, good afternoon. I'm Paul Winstanley. I'm currently the Chief Executive of an organisation called CENSIS, the Centre for Sensing, Imaging Systems and IoT. We're one of the 7 Scottish innovation centres, and part of our remit is actually to link IoT into economic growth, so the creation of new products, new solutions, new jobs, etc. But also looking at how we can see IoT contribute to you're creating positive societal impact. So an example of that may be the use of IoT, which allows elderly or infirm to stay in their own homes for longer. In terms of my personal journey, I'm a technologist. So I studied applied physics. Prior to that, I grew up in a family business, an engineering business. After leaving university, I went to work in UK government, where I was fortunate to work in and around a number of departments. I then moved into the private sector. So at this stage, I was working in defence and security. Last job I did in the sector was I ran the US operation for a UK-based defence and security company, QinetiQ. I moved back to the UK in mid-2009, did a period of consultancy, and then from a consultancy grew my own business. So the way I kind of describe myself is I'm a translator, in that I work between government, large industry, and small industry. In terms of my involvement in IoT, that's actually sort of relatively recent, though I'd probably spent the last 20 years of my professional career, I'd pulled out of deep technical specialism into more general engineering management. And what I found myself occupying were typically large-scale project, large-scale systems engineering tasks. So my brain tends to work fairly well when I've got a breadth of a problem to solve rather than a deep specialist problem these days. So whilst I've only been relatively recent in IoT, I've done a number of things which have involved embedding sensors into quite complex systems. So for example, in the past, I was technical director of an avionics business, for example. So I'm quite used to putting sensors and systems into operation.
Nice. And I'm quite interested to hear what your answer is on the next one then, because you're in a very unique place. So CENSIS is a not-for-profit. It's an enabler for the economy, but also coming from an MOD and security kind of background, that's also quite a unique. Not everyone comes from there into IoT. So if I ask you what IoT means to you, how would you answer that question?
So I think one of the things that I actually look at, we've got in our facility in Glasgow, we've got an IoT centre where we have a number of examples of IoT systems either we or third-party partners have worked on. And these can be wide and varied in their application. IoT cuts across a range of market sectors. However, I think the thing that tends to sort of link them all together is that it's about improving productivity and actually allowing us to sort of do things more efficiently than we've been able to do in the past. And that may be, that may range from detecting we've got conditions in a school which says Legionella may be starting to sort of reproduce, and how do you deal with that without having to send a man in a van with a thermometer around the country, which is pretty irksome when you've got some of the rural areas that we have. But also, how do I detect when my machinery, my production machinery, is getting ready for maintenance, and allowing you to move from reactive repair to proactive maintenance. So that's another example. Whilst we probably shouldn't really consider it, allowing an elderly person to stay in their own home again is a manifestation of productivity. So productivity enhancement is for me the key thing. In terms of sort of the and you raised my government background. I think the thing that I'm probably most sensitive to personally is actually the security ramifications. What we are seeing is a very, very substantial growth in IoT-enabled systems, and quite rightly, there are a number of security concerns about that. We're seeing all sorts of activity at the moment from UK government in this area, particularly through DCMS, digital culture, media, sport, where they're in all sorts of competitions to raise the profile of security, quite rightly. But I think also we can begin to see, looking forward, there'll be changes in policy, government policy here. So making sure we can deliver that productivity without compromising our security. And some of the applications I talked about, you run the risk of exposing some quite significant personal data. So making sure that we can actually sort of protect that data and that information whilst delivering the productivity.
Okay, it's a really nice kind of point to make there. It's kind of one of those ones that has to be in place before scale can really kind of come, and it's more important to some people than others. But yeah, for the public, if they're being traced or etc., then there's some things that people will begin to think more about in time.
I think we've seen public response to this. Facial recognition, I think, is a great example at the moment, whereby there's been a reaction to it. I think we need to report accurately what we're doing, why we're doing it, and we need policymakers to actually respond to the advances in technology and the advances in our legislation. The reality is, and again, this is consistent with my own experience, technology moves way faster than legislation or policy. So there's always going to be an element of catch-up. But equally, I think my challenge to other innovators in the IoT space is making sure that they raise the potential of what their solution can do, so it's given due consideration from a legislative or a policy perspective.
Okay, so there's quite a lot kind of came out there, and you talked about a couple of all good stuff, and you talked through a couple of nice examples there, and other ones which I found on your website were also like, so you talked about the social housing. There was also an example about fuel poverty, even from chemotherapy treatments to fitness through to cow health. If we then look at that ecosystem, and you're there to help that ecosystem within the Scottish kind of economy, you've got obviously the IoT Scotland project to help with LoRaWAN rollout, which is one of the platforms. How do you see the ecosystem within Scotland at the moment and its maturity and kind of the direction of travel?
So we've actually got quite a vibrant ecosystem. Much of the ecosystem historically has been invested in small, medium-sized enterprise. We've got an awful lot of startup. And again, from an economic perspective, this is one area where Scotland is actually different to England. We've got a much greater density of SMEs and a much greater dependency on them. And so a lot of this is actually working with young companies to actually allow them to really respond to a market opportunity effectively. So that side of it, I think, is actually, it is vibrant. The other area which we are seeing increasingly is the opportunity to engage with larger companies. So these are companies typically who are working with either regional government, municipal councils, and increasingly what they're looking to do is use IoT as part of their own differentiation and create differentiation of services. And that's the other area where we're seeing quite a big swing in interest from. And I think particularly when you begin to combine the two, so a large part of my working days typically is A meet B, B meet A. I think you need to talk about and giving them context, and an awful lot of that is actually done between small, innovative Scottish companies and some of the bigger UK-wide organisations, where you can see uptake and scale of deployment, really.
Great. And and then if we kind of take a kind of sideways look to then look again at the ecosystem in a slightly different way. So you must be speaking to a lot of companies who are getting started in IoT. You're talking, now maybe about not just small and medium-sized enterprises, but also then kind of the larger organizations. When people are getting started with IoT, they're maybe wanting to start a project internally as a company. Maybe it's their first time to implement some of the IoT solutions. And what's your advice to them when they're getting started?
Don't be frightened to experiment. You're certainly coming from sort of defense industry. Defense can run and does run the risk of it moves too quickly to the aspiration of a final solution. And I think certainly with IoT, there's some great platforms out there which allow you to sort of see and test the feasibility of new concepts. And so really that would be my first call. Actually go out and test it, put it in front of customers, see what their reaction is, but also be careful in terms of your expectation management, because what you're actually showing them is not a finished solution. It's actually an indication of what may be delivered, and actually use that as part of your information gathering, and then take the outputs from that to feed into your design of your first launch product. So really encouraging a lot of experimentation to understand what can be done, but more importantly, what can't be done.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. And if I then ask about, so again, you're seeing quite a broad variety of IoT companies across kind of all of the different sectors or verticals, as some people call them. And some are succeeding more than others, perhaps, and that could be the industry or the sector, but it could also be the approach of the business or some of the skills or tactics that are being used. From what you're seeing, what do you think are some of the best kind of leadership styles or core competencies that the businesses that are succeeding the most are using, that you think maybe, thinking more of the people skills rather than the technology skills?
Yeah. I mean, we've been pretty fortunate that we've actually sort of worked with a couple of companies at early stage who are in the process of growing quite significantly. So we've actually sort of seen firsthand this phenomena. I also think we've also seen in terms of our broader ecosystem. So colleagues such as Scottish Edge, they've also picked up some of these companies at a slightly later date. Scottish Enterprise, High Growth Ventures, likewise. So we've seen quite a lot of reinforcement. So I'm thinking now specifically of those two companies. And I think the thing that I would actually say about both of the founders, one case it's two founders, or all of the founders in those companies, is that they've got great combination, a couple of things. They've got great listening skills, and they've got a very acute awareness of where their expertise is. So what they don't try and do is portray themselves in a particular manner so they appear, portray themselves as being deep experts in certain areas. What they do is utilize their skills and say, actually, this is part of the jigsaw we understand. However, there's aspects of it which we don't understand. And both organizations have been really good at understanding where they can get those complementary skills from. And so what I'm talking about is team building, it's perhaps those collaborative skills. And just to re-emphasize, they've both got great listening skills as well. So those are the things which I think are, from my experience, are probably at the top of my mind right now.
Oh, that's good advice as well. So it's good. And then if I kind of ask you, again, we kind of take a step back and look at it from a different angle. And I'm asking this question because, again, so many different people come to this from their personal angle, also then, as being leaders within this industry, within a certain sector or within a technology, or in your case, a kind of geography. So if I ask you what success means to you, can you answer that first as Paul the person, and then also as CEO of CENSIS for what you think success means for then IoT within Scotland?
So I think success as a person, you either look at it from two different perspectives, and this, for me, this has changed over my working career. You either look at value or vindication. And I think, partly because of what I'm doing, because it is a not-for-profit, I'm very, very clearly at this stage in my career in the vindication camp, which says, my overarching argument is, I told you we could do this, and it's arguments like that that you feel. So for me, success today is actually, and personal success today, is seeing a number of new applications be launched. And this is probably where it begins to converge with the second part of the question, in that this is seeing new companies being born, new products being launched, those companies growing, employing more people, etc. You begin to see that sort of that increased trajectory, where you can then look back and assess, okay, we have seen a significant increase in economic activity as a consequence of the interventions we've made. So that for me, it's actually seeing those early stage companies come through with their first products, and actually that many instances that's actually quite a arduous and challenging journey, but actually seeing them come through, seeing them grow.
Great. And as a Scot and also a graduate of Glasgow University, then I will be watching you closely to see where this all goes.
Good.
Okay. Good. So just before we finish, then, do you have any advice for somebody who's maybe a Scottish company who's kind of been busy with their own idea for a while and now wants to kind of go to market? Any kind of services or advice that they can get from you to then kind of take that forward?
Yeah, I mean, we're always open to engagement. We've got a relatively small team, just under 20. So we have got capacity challenges on many occasions, but notwithstanding that, engagers talk to us. They say we're part of the university. We operate as a not-for-profit organisation, so we don't have an underlying profit motive when we engage with companies, and we have got the really quite altruistic aims in terms of economic growth, societal impact, and so actually linking that into the company and seeing positive outcomes is really important for us. So the key message, I think, is actually give us a phone. Phone me up. If I can't help you, I'm pretty sure that one of my colleagues can. And that type of engagement for us is our lifeblood, and actually doing more of that is a good thing. I guess the other part of this, and it kind of relates partly to what we do, I think, that if I look at some of those relationships that we form, particularly with young companies, and we're early in that relationship, part of what we're doing is almost providing a mentoring service for those companies. And I think people looking at IoT, perhaps from, such as in my own case, from an adjacent industry or skills base, I'd encourage you to actually look at who's done it. Where can you be mentored from? And again, there's an awful lot of really good groups around Scotland in particular where you can achieve that. And so I'd just really encourage people to think about who is that trusted voice when they who is that trusted person when they pick up the phone to say, look, I'm thinking of doing this, what do you think? And again, for me, that's just been an invaluable experience in terms of my own career today.
Cool. Thank you so much, Paul. Good luck. And
thank you.
And we'll leave the recording there. Thank you.